Hello everybody, I'm Roxy and this is Rock Me BS. Today I come to talk to you about short books. I was going to do just one video talking about the books I've read and I recommend to you versus the books that I want to read, so a TBR of sorts, but it got too long. I traveled recently to London and in the spirit of getting to support as many bookshops as I could, I tried to look for shorter books. It sort of drove me to the tables that I usually never checked out. Quick reads for the train, or recommended picks for the summer, or recommended under 200 pages, and I thought that was super interesting because I actually read some things I loved. Short books tend to have a bad rep. Yes, sure, you can read them faster, but here in BookTube, like, a short book is considered 300 pages long. People rarely consider like really short books because they think it's not worth paying for them, or like just investing yourself in a read that you're only going to finish in one sitting, which I think is really ridiculous because it takes a lot of skill to make a short book that is really powerful and has the same impact that you can get in a 600-page novel. They even have like novellas instead of novels, which, you know, it's a weird distinction to make, I think personally, because in Spanish that doesn't happen. We have novela for like both novels and novellas. We just say novela corta, short novel. So that's a marketing distinction, and again, they are really hard to make because when you read a 500-page long book, there are lots of redeeming things that you can see. Maybe you don't like the whole book, but you will stay with the parts you like the most. But when it's so short and condensed, you really have to make a really solid book all the way, and I think that's fascinating and that's really hard to do, and I just want to celebrate that. I'm going to just name different books that I think are awesome. This is a Spanish edition of The Character of Rain by Emily Nothomb. This is the story of a young girl born in Japan, which is sort of autobiographical as a baby, and she talks about how she discovers pleasure and starts living once she tries white chocolate. And it's sort of her discovering the world. It tells from when she's born until she's 3 years old and her parents moved from Japan. This is Emily Nothomb's best of what I read because she continues this saga along the years, and none of what I read comes close to matching The Character of Rain. Then I have a classic that I think everyone should read, and that's The Great Gatsby. A lot of people don't like this because they don't like the characters, but the characters themselves, if not lovable, they are fascinating, and the way they engage with each other and the way the unreliable narrator Nick talks about Gatsby, who is this very mysterious man who is in love with Nick's cousin, who's, by the way, married. And again, it's a very famous story. The thing is that Nick's adoration for Gatsby is very interesting, and the way he tells the story is so fascinating. This stands to many rereads. I'm due for one soon, and it's just really good. Einstein's Dreams by Alan Lightman, and this is sort of novel slash short story collection, and it's about Albert Einstein. While he's working on his theory of relativity, he's thinking of different ways in which time works, and so he has all these dreams of these worlds where time works differently, and the message is very out there. It's not like subtle, but the book itself is really well written, and I just think it's a treasure. It's really good for comfort too. I think it's just a book to curl up with, and I think it's great. A Depression by William Styron, and this is an essay by Vintage Minis, and these are going to pop up also in my TBR video. But this one in particular I really liked because it's very personal for me. I liked how it dealt with depression and mental health. And William Styron is not perhaps the most likable person ever, but the way he speaks of depression is so truthful. And I know depression works differently for everyone, but I think you'll find a nice mixture of like medical information and personal narrative. Then I have some other books that I don't have here presently with me, but that I've read and adored. And so we have Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift, and this is a satirical essay. I don't know if you know what the proposal is, but it deals with the amount of beggars found in the streets of England. Jonathan Swift, of course, has a very special humor, not for everyone. I personally loved it, and so I'd recommend it. Gochar, which is a book I recently read. This is a story of how both money and outsiders affect a family who was previously like very close knit. The point is how the family deals with money, how it might break them, but it also might not at all, but how having this money also leads them to associate with certain people. A lot of people don't like it because they think that the views expressed regarding females is not the best, and I actually think these are the opinions of the narrator, not the author. At least that's what I think. I think the narrator is very consistent, and it's interesting to see how he thinks of women, and also like it's very cultural because this is set in India. That's another element. I personally think it's a brilliant book, and I really recommend it. I also read Playing to the Gallery by Grayson Perry. It was just amazing. He talks about contemporary art and the politics and the community of current contemporary art, and it's just fascinating. Some of it is really like encouraging, and some of it is just like it sucks. I mean, not the book, but what goes on there. It's both encouraging and discouraging, and I really love it. If you're interested in contemporary art at all, especially if you're just like getting into it or trying to get into it or trying to understand what the hell is the big like hoopla about, I really recommend this book. I also read Reunion, which actually was just a recommended book that I saw at Hatchard's, about a friendship, like a really strong friendship between a Jewish boy and a German boy, and then how it sort of falls apart because of the Nazi regime. And the thing is that World War II is not mentioned at all. They talk about the Nazis, but really as something that was happening on a parallel, but how it affects their friendship. On What in Paradise It Seems by John Cheever. This was my first Cheever, and a lot of people say it's not his best at all. I can't wait to read more because I personally love this. A lot of people don't like the ending, but I personally think it was earned. This is about a man who's trying to prove that some companies polluted a lake, an abstract near future that could actually be our future. So I think it's just really interesting. Then I have La Femme de Gilles by Madeleine Bourdouzet. I talked about this on Instagram, but now I've finished it, and so I just want to share how amazingly great this debut novel is, and I'm so happy that Madeleine Bourdouzet was just rediscovered because she's amazing. She's a Belgian author. She has another novel that I want to check out and a collection of short stories. It's about a woman whose life is all about her husband. She's so in love with him, but in a way that's obsessive, in the way that she doesn't have any identity but her husband. And then her husband starts liking her younger sister. The writing is great, the translation was really good, I presume, and I just really recommend it. Of course, if you can read French, go ahead. I also want to recommend The House of Mango Street. I had to read this for a class with a teacher that I didn't really like very much, but the book itself is really good. It's a sort of collection of short stories again, but it works as a novel, and it's a story about a Mexican-American girl, a Chicana girl, trying to develop her identity, trying to understand her place in a world where she's both an immigrant and also a woman, and she feels this need to escape, to be sort of better than her background, to get a real house. And it's, again, very interesting. The language is very beautiful. This sort of fiction is kind of exhausted by now in many ways, but I think Sandra Cisneros gets it so right. Then I want to recommend Dark Lies the Island by Kevin Barry. Kevin Barry wrote Beetlebone, which I loved. I want to also read City of Bohane. Dark Lies the Island is a collection of short stories, not all set in Ireland, which I think is interesting, but very concerned with relationships, and it has a very masculine technique, which I think is interesting because I tend to read a lot of books by female authors, so here is a male author really taking the way men relate to each other and to women in a very interesting way. Also, Kevin Barry has a very twisted and dark sense of humor, so I think you might appreciate that. Then I also want to recommend The White Book by Han Kang, which I've talked about several times. I'm going to link the wrap-up where I talked about this, but this is basically the author reflecting on the fact that she had an older sister that was actually, I don't know if a stillborn or died very shortly after having been born, and she's very acutely aware that she might not have been born had this sister lived. I also have 3 books that are from Latin American authors that I like to recommend that I know for certain that are translated. Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. She's an Argentinian author. Fever Dream has actually been nominated to the Man Booker International. Relatively well known within booktube, but I want to urge you to pick it up because it feels very relevant. It's sort of not magical realism, but it could be crossing into that. I think it's more about suspension of disbelief, if anything, and it's about being very eerie. Things are not what they seem, and where do you cross the line between being a paranoid parent and being appropriately concerned for your child? About a woman who arrives to this very small country town with her daughter and what plays out there. I also have Multiple Choice by Alejandro Zambra. Alejandro Zambra is one of my favorite Chilean authors. An experimental fiction book. It's shaped like the test we take to get into college. Here we get into college based on school grades and that test, unless there are like some sort of special programs. Normally, like, we don't have to interview with anyone, we just enter based on the score, so it's much less personal and it's much more based on just the test, which is, it has the highest percentage of influence, and so that's shown in Multiple Choice. It talks about many things. It's very localized, I would say, like it deals a lot with like Chilean situation, but I also think like there is a wider context there about life and expectations and what as young people we are expected to become. And finally, I also want to recommend Bodies of Summer, which is a dystopian novel where people can buy bodies and so survive, and while they don't buy the bodies they can survive online. It's very twisted and very dark. I think it doesn't go for the obvious route, which I really enjoy. I just think you should totally check it out because it's just so fun. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was very long. It has tons of recommendations, but I feel good about them because I feel like I'm always bringing TBRs and book hauls and vlogs, and not much of the reading gets across. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Please check my bookstagram and subscribe. See you next time.